for tuning in a segment from the Halloween edition of the Slumpbuster podcast. If you are rolling with the Michigan Wolverines this week, go ahead and leave a like on this video.
And if you are feeling Sparty green this week, make sure to drop a comment in support of the 7-0 Michigan State Spartans.
Don't forget to subscribe. Number 6 Michigan, number 8 Michigan State, both teams entering 7-0. Obviously, Niners fan here. I was pro Jim Harbaugh for years. And when he went over to Michigan, stayed pro Harbaugh. And I've always found it unique, this conversation around Harbaugh, as far as how much longer does he got in Michigan? How much longer do you go? The guy's giving you 8-10 wins consistently in college football. And that's a lot to ask, but you're judged by beating your rivals. He currently has a 3-3 record against Michigan State. He has never beat Ohio State. And those are two key factors that are used against him whenever people are talking about his job security moving forward. But he has perhaps his best, most talented Michigan team that he's ever had. Now, there's questions at the quarterback position. Cade McNamara, not exactly a dynamic thrower. They've been really living with their running game, which has been one of the best in the nation, of course, when you consider Blake Corrum and Hassan Haskins have been giving them a versatile 1-2 punch. Now, they're going against this Michigan State team that has been one of the biggest surprises in college football. They are 7-0 under Mel Tucker in his second year. Mel Tucker wasn't even their first choice. He was behind Luke Fickell in Michigan State's rankings as far as who they wanted as their head coach. I know the fan base wasn't excited about it, but here you go, second year. They only had 2 wins in his first year. In that 2020 COVID shortened year, they only had 2 wins, but those 2 wins against number 8 Northwestern, number 8. That sounds crazy.
Yeah,
that
forgot that was a thing.
That tells you that was a COVID year. And then number 13, Michigan. So obviously got the most recent win in this series, beating Michigan when they were ranked last year. Out the gate here, I'm going to say my pick is going to be Michigan. I think that they just have the right personnel to be able to contain, Kenneth Walker, who's a top 5 Heisman candidate this year. They have a good run defense. And if you could keep the running game contained for Michigan State, put it all on their quarterback, Payton Thorn, I think that that's your opportunity to win. Aidan Hutchinson is a top 10 NFL prospect, and I think that they could develop a good pass rush. I think I'm going with Michigan. They are currently the road favorite by about 3 points, 4 points. Last I checked the line, and I think that that's going to hold up. What about you, Kyle? Where are you on this one?
I am also leaning Michigan here, which I think is just kind of what the nation is going at large, is that it's we feel like Michigan's the favorites, but we're not sold that they're going to win the game. I joked earlier in the year that Michigan State has had the same quarterback for 13 years. It's just been a different version of basically the exact same quarterback, from Lewerke to Kirk Cousins. I forgot the guy who was just there before, but
I have heard the Payton Thorn to Kirk Cousins comparison. Some people think that he has NFL aspirations. So Kirk Cousins, that would be appropriate.
Yeah, Connor Cook in there too. They usually get drafted in the 6th round or something like that. They're never really that good, but they're good enough. Michigan State's just kind of been trying to find that quarterback for about 13 years, and Payton Thorn's kind of the same version of that. So I feel like I know what Michigan State is, except for the fact that now they have this all NCAA running back in Kenneth Walker. And you mentioned him before. You've thrown the stats out. He is really good. Kenneth Walker is really good, and it's a big reason why Michigan State is as good as they are, only behind the fact that they haven't really played anyone actually that good this year.
Want to hear his numbers? 900 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns. He's putting up Derrick Henry type numbers this year, so that's why he's elevated himself into that top 5 conversation for the Heisman. He literally has the 5th best odds, which may be because it's a bad quarterback year, but you have a standout performance by a running back like Walker here. It's definitely going to put some notice on the nation. In fact, I've heard a lot of people talk about this maybe a year in which we rethink how we go about Heisman voting, because it's not just best player on best team, it's just best player in college football. Regardless if Michigan State finishes the year undefeated or not, Kenneth Walker still has a legitimate chance at winning this thing. People are even throwing out Bijan Robinson, and Texas has lost multiple games this year, but people will even talent of Bijan Robinson. You still have guys like Matt Corral sitting there at an Ole Miss, and then Bryce Young, of course, who's currently the favorite. But Kenneth Walker's had one of those years that's really put him in that conversation. He's definitely going to be a guy that plays on Sundays.
Yeah. And this is the first time in a decade that we haven't had an obvious Heisman winner, right? If you go back a little bit, you had obviously Devonta Smith. Everyone knew was going to win it last year. Joe Burrow ran away with it. Kyler Murray ran away with it. Baker Mayfield ran away with it. Lamar Jackson ran away with it. Derrick Henry ran away with it. Mariota, one of the greatest college seasons ever. Jameis Winston and against Johnny Manziel was probably the last time we had a contested Heisman race. And that was, again, best quarterback, best team. And we went with Jameis Winston that year. And then he ended up being the number one pick anyways. But still, maybe this is the reevaluation. Maybe this is analytics seeping into college football, or also the fact that the best teams in college football don't have a star quarterback this year. Maybe that's just part of it. But even still, I think the matchup I'm interested in this game a bunch. And to be fair, I have not watched very much Michigan football this year, but I am interested to see Michigan's offense against Michigan State's defense in this game, because Michigan State might have the best defense in the Big Ten in terms of stopping offenses from scoring points. I know that's not everything when it comes to defensive evaluation.
Yeah, strength of schedule, I think, is also a thing that you have to consider there, because Michigan State, their best team they've played is currently Miami, and Miami fell off the face of the earth after that game.
I said that a little bit before. I'm like, the only difference, the only thing keeping them afloat is the fact they have not played anybody good this year. This is the way the Big Ten always does. I was joking about this a couple of weeks ago, where I'm like, there's 5 teams ranked in the Big Ten, but they're all going to start beating each other up real quick soon. And that came early, because Iowa lost to Purdue, Penn State lost to Brett Bielema in Illinois. Like, it came early on the Big Ten beating everyone. I thought it was going to be like Penn State and Michigan, and Michigan State, and Ohio State playing Michigan State, and they were all just going to beat each other up. About now, they got to work early this year on beating each other up, with Illinois pulling off maybe the upset of the year in the 9 overtime game from either heaven or hell. I'm not exactly sure, but
craziest stat there. One thing that everyone's talking about too with Michigan, I mentioned that Cade McNamara isn't the most dynamic quarterback. He makes smart decisions with the football, doesn't turn it over, but there's a lot of people that are calling for this JJ McCarthy kid to step up and take over that reign. So you have a little bit of a quarterback competition. It makes me wonder if Michigan State does have a good start to this game, is holding Michigan's offense, if they would be willing to make that transition, similar to what we saw with Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams earlier in the year.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because for Michigan, one of the things they've been good at in the past is like drawing out these like 9-minute drives where they can end up holding the ball long enough to score points. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Michigan State. I could be wrong. Again, I have not watched much Michigan football this year, put that disclaimer out there, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Michigan State's defense. And if that's the case, I think the way that we're going to get to that point might not even be with turnovers. It might turnovers will speed up the transition, but it might just be like punt, punt, punt. If we see that over and over again, that's when you're going to start to feel a little concerned, because if the offense is stagnant, then that's when you can kind of look up and say, what do we have to throw at them? If nothing we're doing on offense works, because Michigan doesn't have the most innovative offenses of all time. Like, Jim Harbaugh does just enough on offense to get by, and it benefits from having Andrew Luck or Colin Kaepernick as your quarterback to make everything that much better. But even still, they don't have the most innovative offenses of all time. So if nothing starts working in this game, which I think is possible, I just assume Big Ten games will always be both teams scoring in the 20s and points are going to be at a premium. Then does Michigan hit the panic button at that point? If Michigan State jumps out to a really early lead, if they have a pick 6, I don't know when they hit the panic button on that. You were talking about Jim Harbaugh earlier too. And I found interesting that Michigan and him kind of both agreed, like, you're not worth top 5 coach money, but we'd still like to keep you as the coach. So I think
that's Jim Harbaugh's kind of like mentality. I think that's the thing that I almost love about the guy, that he's very honest. He's very open about like his personnel, his players, his own performance. I think he's the most critical of himself. And I think that's why players tend to gravitate towards him and love him.
And remember, I kind of remember in the way that you remember Northwestern was ranked number 8 at one point last year. Like, remember at the end of last year, Jim Harbaugh was kind of like his agent was like leaking his name in coaching searches, like with the Detroit Lions, or connecting him with interest to the Chicago Bears. Like, he was trying to see what other options were out there. When people realized there wasn't really much of an interest for Jim Harbaugh, he re-upped with Michigan for, I think, like a 42% pay cut or something like that. I think now he's like the 5th highest paid coach in the Big Ten.
Oh, believe though, if Michigan does make the college football playoffs, I think even if they don't make the college football playoffs, there's still going to be some NFL teams that give him a call this winter, because I feel as though that they feel Jim Harbaugh is a coach that at bare minimum has made it back to the Super Bowl. The only thing that you hold against Jim is he wears on you quick. He does have that type of personality, that temperament that only lasts him about 4 or 5 years in most destinations. That's why it's impressive that he's been with Michigan for this 6-year stretch and perhaps longer given their success that they're having this season. Again, it's all going to come down to rivalry weeks, though. Is he going to beat Michigan State? Is this going to be the year he gets over the hump and beats Ohio State? Now, that could create a little bit of a triangle there at the top of who makes it to the college football playoffs. If Michigan wins this game and then Ohio State still gets the best of Michigan, then that's going to create, I guess Ohio State's back in there again with the one loss to Oregon.
With all the chaos this year, this one does feel quite obvious. Whoever wins the Big Ten championship will get into the playoffs, and there will be one team out of the Big Ten. I don't know exactly how the math is going to work out on that because of tiebreaker situations, but it feels like even through all the chaos, someone is going to run the table through the gauntlet. My bet would be Ohio State is going to beat Michigan State, beat Penn State, beat Michigan, get to the conference championship, beat Iowa. They'll be good. Maybe Michigan does that where they, beat Michigan State, beat Penn State, beat Ohio State, beat Iowa in the conference championship. I feel like someone's going to run the gauntlet. Either Ohio State or Michigan feel most likely, but Michigan State is technically undefeated still at the time of recording. So theoretically, Michigan State could beat Michigan, beat Penn State, beat Ohio State. It's still technically possible, and they'll make the college football playoff for the second time because people forget Michigan State did make the college football playoff a few years ago. They got blanked by Alabama, but they were still in the playoff. It's like how people forget that Washington was in the playoff too a few years ago.
Hopefully we never forget when Cincinnati makes it to the playoff this year, because they seem on pace to run the table. And I think given what they did last year, they're going to have the opportunity to legitimately make it. So like you mentioned, it seems like there's 2 spots that are going to be dedicated to Georgia and Alabama. There's going to be Cincinnati, who it just by sheer record and sheer volume of wins, they're going to make it. And then it's going to come down to who wins that Big Ten. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just hoping that it is Michigan. At least this weekend, you and I are aligned here. We are both taking the Michigan Wolverines to beat Sparty in Michigan State Stadium.